Are you all ready?
Sure.
Get started? Sure, thank you. All right. Thank you all for coming out for our final panel of the day, one of our 3 final panels of the day. So this panel is called Past Reflection, Forward Progress, Douglass School, Kokomo, Indiana. And I will add to that, I'm actually from Muncie, Indiana. So it's nice to have some Midwesterners here, some Hoosiers. So on the panel, we have Sarah Heath, who is an associate professor of history at Indiana University, Kokomo. She holds a BA in history from the College of Worcester and an MA and Ph.D. from the University of Cincinnati. She has previously worked for the National Park Service on the Brown versus Board of Education historic site. And her research has focused on such topics as extremism, national desegregation debates, and other matters relating to educational debates, public policy, and the National Parent-Teacher Association. She is the recipient of Indiana University's President's Award for Distinguished Teaching. She is most active in the community in her work with the Howard County Historical Society and the Douglass School Committee. Reverend Dr. William J. Smith Jr. is the senior pastor of the historic Second Missionary Baptist Church in Kokomo, Indiana. He also serves as the president of Embracing Hope of Howard County, Indiana, and project coordinator for Douglass School Restoration. Pastor Smith has been instrumental in social justice work in the community, ensuring that all people of Howard County / Kokomo are respected. His work has been recognized by Wesley Theological Seminary, Washington, D.C., Calvin College, Morehouse College, and Wabash College Pastoral Leadership Program. Reverend Dr. Smith serves on several denominational, ecumenical, and community boards. He is in receipt of a BA and MA from Virginia University of Lynchburg, and MDiv, what's that abbreviation for? Masters of Divinity from Christian Theological Seminary, Indianapolis, Indiana. And what's the DN abbreviated?
Doctor of Ministry.
Doctor of Ministry from United Theological Seminary in Dayton, Ohio, and possesses several certificates in nonprofit leadership and proposal grant writing. Amy Russell began her 45-year career at the Kokomo Howard County Public Library as a bookmobile librarian. She spent several years as a special librarian for metallurgical company Haynes International before returning to KHCPL as head of the genealogical and local history department. The department draws people as far away as California to New Jersey and Minnesota to Florida. She has a Bachelor of Arts in Media Science from Purdue University and a Master of Library Science from Indiana University. She has a passion for local history and family history research. Her work with the Douglass School Committee has allowed her to explore new techniques for gathering and archiving the history of the African American community. And with that, I will let you all present.
Great. Well, thanks so much. And thanks to the Lemon Symposium for having us. So what we're going to do today is talk a little bit about our work with the Douglass Elementary School, which figured very prominently in Kokomo's desegregation debates. So I'm going to talk a little bit about remembrance, about the history of the building and some background issues from Kokomo. Amy is going to talk about relationships. That is, how did we establish a community committee that could keep working towards a sense of common purpose? And Reverend Smith will be talking about restoration. So what are we doing and how do we make that happen? So a couple things that I really want us to be thinking about, and where you're going to see a lot of references to Frederick Douglass. So the elementary school was named after him. And one of the biggest things that we are really concerned about is not only being aware of the history, but also thinking about, how can you make a building that was significant in the past, keep sustaining that significance to people in the present and moving forward. So, we keep thinking the pain of segregation is just one of many different aspects that really make for a complex situation in Kokomo. So how can we be useful to the community? how can we keep the school as a center of significance among everybody in our city? So as we think about remembrance, again, I'm the historian that's part of a very large coordinating committee. So just a bit of background relating to the Douglass School. So the Douglass School was named after Frederick Douglass, the abolitionist and statesman. The school opened in 1920, and it was originally intended to serve grades 1 through 7 from the African-American community. Now, a couple things happened starting in 1940. So first thing, Eleanor Roosevelt actually visited Kokomo and met with some of the students. And the prominence of that event led then to, and I'm going to move ahead. So you're seeing here some of the images of Eleanor Roosevelt meeting with students from Kokomo. The building in the lower right-hand portion of that screen was actually the result of an ongoing effort by Principal Perry. When he realized that there was a great deal of public acclaim surrounding Roosevelt's visit, he generated contributions to establish a community center. So even at present, the Douglass School sits kitty corner to the Carver Center, and the Carver Center still engages in work for the surrounding community. 1949, the state of Indiana ordered the desegregation of Indiana public schools, and as we notice everywhere else, right, that was a long, laborious process, but there was a legislative kind of marker that said by 1954, the desegregation process should be completed. So as of 1954, with the Supreme Court decision of Brown versus Ford, there was a merger so that students now of both races attended Douglass School for grades kindergarten through 3rd, and then the 4, 5, and 6 was the upper levels, and that was at the Willard School, which had been a white school at the time. So the school was closed in 1968. It continued as an employment training center, as a nursing school, but eventually it closed down. So the building was vacant since the 1990s. And that's where things really started with the work that we did is, people reached out to me starting, I think, in 2016 or 17. And then in 2019, we had members from Kokomo's City Council attending our meetings. And so they were able to help us with tax liens so that the committee could reacquire the property. So the owner was out of town and had not been paying taxes. And that left the building in rather bad shape. Okay, so basically, we're in this position where we very quickly moved towards acquiring the school building. And, then we realized that Kokomo is a very unusual location to be doing this kind of work. So, the name Indiana, right, the land of Indians. The city of Kokomo was named after a Miami Indian chief, and as many cities and communities have done, there's a lot of effort to really remind ourselves that we are residents of place, right? That we are assuming ownership of land that belong to others. As well, Kokomo is unusual because it is the site of one of the largest national meetings of the KKK. So there was a KKK clavern held in 1923, exactly 100 years ago. The Klan still is somewhat active in the community. So, there are periodic extremist groups that could sort of crop up. I know my own brother-in-law has been invited to join the group many times. Keeps saying no, but they keep coming after him. So that, it's just sort of a constant presence, right? That the Klan is always known to be in the region. And in spite of all of that, Kokomo is also kind of a place of opportunity, right? It's figured very prominently in the Great Migration northward from World War I and onward. Many people have come to the region because of different factory opportunities. It's somewhat proximate to Chicago, so you can get there in about 3 or 4 hours. And so for some people, it really has been seen as a site of a different opportunity that people could exploit, rather than remaining amid other more outspoken expressions of extremism. Okay, so with the background, then I think one of the biggest points of focus for us is thinking about, what are the different things that we could be doing aside from just acquiring a historic building, right? So, thinking about what could or what should the building become is really important to us. So again, recognizing its historic significance is one piece, but keeping it relevant in the minds of those who are part of our community was another big element. So of course, a lot of this work was done during the pandemic, but we focused a lot on the other pandemic, right? That the George Floyd incident took place. There was a lot of protest, a lot of concern, and we felt that this fit into a much broader history of racism and exclusion that had to be addressed. We also engaged in a lot of efforts to do surveys within the community. So Amy and the library were instrumental in really reaching out and seeking the opinions of the community. And I think that that's crucial, right? Somebody like me just can't walk in there and impose, like, I think you guys need this, right? We have to know what the community wants. We think a lot about, who Frederick Douglass was and what he stood for. Of course, the Douglass name appears on lots of different schools, but we really wanted his activism, his ardent focus on equity to really inform the efforts that we were engaging in. We also thought a lot about segregated school stories. So again, one of my other previous lives was working for the National Park Service. So I was the lead historian on the project that made the Monroe Elementary School a National Historic Landmark. So that's the elementary school that Linda Brown attended. And finally, just thinking, again, more broadly, so it wasn't just a story of, individuals or accomplishments, but also really addressing the regional significance. So past accomplishments of the African-American community, prominent members of that community who have really moved the groups forward. And so a lot of that relates to the fact that Kokomo, going the wrong way. There we go. Okay. So there already had been a community focus on other prominent elements of Black history, most notably the creation of an MLK monument. We didn't want this to be a simple bust or a statue. There is a statue that stands in front of that, but we also wanted it to be educational and informative. And so there was a great deal of community input to address which panels, right, should be included. What should the messages be? What kind of histories should be written for those elements, right? So we knew that we already had the start of a community committee, different groups of people that were very interested in contributing to a bigger project relating to the school. And so that's where Amy is going to come in, thinking about the different kinds of relationships and how we build on the expertise within the community to make this happen.
I think it's possible that the Douglass School Committee could have done this project by themselves, but my goodness, it would have been difficult. So we have strategic partnerships, and we have help from the Kokomo Howard County Public Library. We partner with the Howard County Historical Society, Indiana University at Kokomo, Second Missionary Baptist Church with Pastor Smith, Indiana Landmarks Commission, great help in helping us keep on track to keep the property historically appropriate, local government, NAACP, and we have a community foundation in Howard County that's very generous with their funding. The library's contribution is something called the Howard County Memory Project. That was formed in 2002, and our efforts are to digitize Howard County documents. So we have a Hoosier art collection at the library, and all of the artwork is on this site. High school yearbooks, full text, pictures, We have African American history, family Bibles, church history, and the cemetery information is very, very popular. These are ongoing contributions. We update frequently as new information comes in. The library had just begun working with the Douglass School Committee when one of our staffers found a record of a woman named Mrs. Ayla Henley. Mrs. Henley was one of the first to purchase land in Howard County in 1844. She was the first woman to purchase this land, and she was the first person of color. She was a former slave from Virginia and was given her freedom in North Carolina. At that time, in 1844, she plopped down $280 in cash for 80 acres of land. In today's dollars, that's just under $1 million. So you see, she was saving up her pennies quite a bit. And in the lower corner there is an artist's rendition of what Mrs. Henley may have looked like. We don't know. That was a long time ago, but a local artist studied her story, and that's what he thinks perhaps she could have looked like. Once we started with Mrs. Henley, and we've been working with Douglass School, we had a grant for $12,500 from the Institute of Library and Museum Sciences. And that was administered by the Indiana State Library. And the focus was to work with Embracing Hope of Howard County to document the history of the African American community. So we were able to go through old newspapers, finding a huge amount of history about the community that had more or less been lost because people don't go back through microfilm very often. And we're continuing this. We found some old scrapbooks hidden away in a closet. We've done some oral histories. We're going to keep adding to the collection as we get items. Cheers.
Well, as you can see that partnerships have been very important. Relationships, building upon those relationships. The library has been a constant partner in helping us to research. The Historical Society has also been a great partner in helping us, and then always our funding partners, because it does take dollars in order for us to do the work that we're doing. So I wanted to talk about restoration a little bit as we are moving forward in this school. As you heard earlier, that the school had been vacant since the late 1990s. And so for that long period of time, you can understand the condition. It basically was abandoned. There was an absentee owner, and we have that in a lot of the community, which we call the Carver community, the Black community there in Kokomo, that there are a lot of individuals who buy the land, but they live in California or other parts of the country and do not pay attention to that land. And so one of the first parts as we talk about restoring, we looked at the importance of making sure that we could get grants. And a part of getting grants is being on the National Register of Historic Places, which we were able to do last year. And of course, it took a little longer. We started the process at the beginning of the pandemic, so it took a little longer during that process. You will see a marker up there, and it was donated by the city. The city actually did this marker. This is not actually a National Register marker, but the city actually gave us this beautiful marker. We appreciate that. Also, not only did we obtain the school, but I always like to talk about the fact that there was a parking lot behind the school that we also obtained. And what the significance is for that parking lot is the fact that that parking lot was used for them to, the kids would play in that parking lot. And it's just interesting as we're moving forward to hear those stories of the significance of properties around some of the kids living in that community. One of the things as we look at restoring the building, we looked at sustainability. How do you take this historic building and continue to hold on to it, whatever it would become? And so we looked at sustaining it, and we looked at renewable energy. There are various options when you look at renewable energy. There are various also opinions, and those of you, if you are looking at preserving a historic building, there are many options. There are things that you have to really think about because one, you don't want to take away from the beauty of the building. Another, of course, is cost. And then also, who in the community can support your efforts. And so we looked at sustainability, and at that time that we were looking at sustainability, the NAACP had been a recipient of a national grant in helping African-American communities to look at renewable energy. And so we were blessed with a $35,000 grant to help us to put solar panels on the building. And so we were able to put solar panels. We also, in our sustainability, not only looked at what we could do to the building, but we also looked at how can we employ African Americans in renewable energy, because it is a growing area and many of our communities are building these solar farms. And so how do we engage African Americans in being trained? And so we connected with our local community college, which was Ivy Tech Community College, and they have been working with also IBEW, the Electrical Workers Union, to be able to train individuals, and not only to do that, but look at how can we get renewable energy into the various homes? How can we connect in the various households within our community to reduce the cost of electricity? What are also some options that we can provide? And then we looked at other grants, and we were able to receive a significant grant that helped us to be able to sustain our building in renewable energy and to add to our electrical to be able to complete that project.
And so a couple of things. First of all, I want to brag on Pastor Smith because he is a masterful grant writer. I think we've secured 400,000 at this point, and that's largely through his ability to write just grants that really target what people are looking for. So I think, just being aware of what's out there. What do you want to do? If you want less interference or input from state or federal agencies, you have to be really careful to target the money that's out there. And I will say too, we had a lot of back and forth with about the solar panels, right? Is it historically accurate? That was a concern that was raised, and partly you really have to point out to some people that they're actually up there. So this is very tall 2-story building, and some people notice it, some don't. But a different argument that we're making is looking forward, it can be not just a museum that records the history of segregation in Kokomo, but also it should be a community center. And for that reason, being able to draw on stored power during, say, tornadoes, we get a tornado at least 1 or 2 every year in the region, and power outages are pretty common. And so just having a place where people can go and charge up their phones or cool off if it's really hot, that's just a different part of serving an ongoing community need.
And as we think about sustainability as well, looking at our homeless population, looking at providing a space for individuals who are homeless, especially during the winter months, that's warm. And then also we're able to provide, electrical needs at little or no cost to us. And so we're grateful for that. Not only do we have a solar, we do want to lift this up. We not only have solar panels on the building, but we have a battery backup, which allows us to store the energy. And so, our hopes is that individuals, even in our community, will be able to tie into Wi-Fi. It would just be a community space inside and outside of the building. I want to show you, I'm excited about this, before and after. So you can see when we acquired it, how it looked. And then after, we were blessed through our city to put a new roof on the building, as well as new windows, and to also stabilize the building so that water would not get into the basement part of the building. And so we have continued to allow ourselves to tell the story. That's very important. and getting funding and also getting support and the community being aware, just telling the story. We were able to not only be involved in just our local news, but also throughout our state, especially through Indiana Landmarks, connecting to even doing radio sessions. I was on the radio for historic preservation, and so being involved in that, as well as IUK, Indiana University of Kokomo, being in their media outlets. And so that allows us to, again, get the word out, getting it out to not only the generation of the population of those who attended the school, but beyond, those who are interested in this type of history. As we go forward, looking back, we also think about the fact, how do we move forward? How do we, it's wonderful for us to be able to restore such a building, but how do we move forward? How do we allow this not just to be another museum that is in the community, but how do we allow ourselves to recognize that as a museum, we allow ourselves to connect directly to the community? And so one of the things that we're excited about is that before even getting into the building, we have just been thinking about, well, even if we are not in the building, what can we do? And I think COVID has also pushed many organizations to think about that, because we've been so tied to building. And so how do we allow ourselves that, because of this building, it's brought us together, but how do we go beyond just the facility itself? And so Frederick Douglass said, it's not light we need, but fire. And so we are grateful for fire being ignited throughout our community. We have seen a Native American mural go forth since this project started. We've seen also the Reverend Dr. Martin Luther King being recognized in various ways, such as you saw the statue, but that memorial has even gotten national acclaim. We've also received at that memorial, there is a kiosk that we will be utilizing to share African-American history and minority history that is available in our community, and developing some sort of trail.
Sorry, it was just a month ago. We also had a segment of a main street named Dr. Martin Luther King Boulevard. So
recognizing it after Dr. King. The other thing that we were able to see is that Historical Society, our local Historical Society, developed an exhibit that focused on African Americans in Kokomo, Howard County area. And that has been a significant exhibit because it provided opportunity for our faces to be there. And we're looking forward to even other efforts going forth from that. Also, the Minority History Trail, we're working with our local economic development and having a trail. We were able to test it out during a hosting of our state's NAACP, and we've been hearing constantly. As a matter of fact, I ran into one individual who experienced that at the airport on the way here, and just talking about how just not aware of that much history that close in Indiana. And so we've seen that. And then also we have an African American featured in the Women's Military Memorial in Kokomo. And so we're excited about the fact that individuals are interested in history and that we have so much rich history. But again, we're finding that out constantly through partnerships. I think the library just recently discovered some more information about a Methodist preacher. And so connecting those dots and seeing not only is it significant to Kokomo, but it's also significant to other communities near us. And so what we are looking at is, again, going back to even that quote at the beginning that Frederick Douglass proclaimed, we have to make history useful. We have to allow ourselves that history can matter even today. One of the things that we're looking at for this facility is allowing history to be important to our younger generation. through a rites of passage, a mentoring program. Knowledge makes a man unfit to be a slave. And so recognizing the fact that our young boys and girls, going through that experience of being mentored by someone else, and then also going through that experience of learning how to grow up and to know about your past, knowing about who you are from the experiences of your past. And then also one of the other experiences is a oratorical and dramatic reading contest, allowing our children to engage in, like Frederick Douglass, a great orator, and allowing themselves to read, allowing themselves to present, allowing themselves to get in front of individuals and to be able to project. And also, building again upon Frederick Douglass, that importance of reading, how Frederick Douglass taught himself, basically. He just all he had was the alphabet and learned from there how to read. And so that significance and that importance of teaching our children to engage in education. Also, connecting it as a museum. Dr. Heath mentioned earlier about the importance of the context of school segregation and what was going on during that period that the school existed, and even when it was the merger happened with the local Willard School, and then even moving from there, understanding there was a lot going on, not just in Kokomo, but how do we connect that with the bigger story of school segregation? And not only that, how do we connect it to today? School segregation still exists. And so how do we talk about that? How do we leave individuals thinking and about education and school segregation wherever they've come from, going into other communities and really creating activists, so to speak. Also, looking at the boardroom, we'll have a boardroom which we call the Room of First. Kokomo is dubbed as the City of First. And so connecting to that, a space that has power because minority figures, those who were the first African-American doctor, those who were the first African-American police officer, and yes, the first African-American president of the United States of America. When individuals come and meet, they see these faces and allow themselves to engage and recognize that, yes, there are persons of color who have been in significant positions and can continue to be in significant places of power. Also, we hope to keep and connect with our history. That of the Carver Community Center, that's just diagonally across the street from Douglass School. So how do we allow the Carver community and Douglass School to maintain that partnership? If it was not for the Douglass School and that meeting in the basement to raise money, the Carver Community Center would not be there. And then so making sure that we maintain that relationship and not allow ourselves to be two community entities that are fighting for dollars, but how do we allow ourselves to partner for dollars in our community? Also, being able to engage churches. We have a church history project to allow just to obtain the rich church history. It was great to hear that earlier today and to hear 3 congregations and their history and how significant churches are to our community. There's a lot of history that is there. And then also connecting to other schools within our community, such as Willard School. Many of the students who attended Douglass School also remember Willard School because during the time of desegregation, they attended both schools. And so allowing both stories to be told. And one of the things I learned, I actually thought they were just one school because many residents will call it Willard Douglass School. And so there is just that natural connection. Also looking at it being a place of economic empowerment, allowing the school to be a place where, small businesses, for instance, many do not have storefronts, but how do you allow small businesses to be able to have some things on sale where it's not just the typical museum store, but how do we allow ourselves to connect and to empower small businesses to get their start? And then also, again, reflection upon the life and the legacy of Frederick Douglass and even Reverend Henry Perry. Frederick Douglass says it's easier to build strong children than to repair broken men. And we think that this is very true. And it's very important for us to teach and engage our students. It was in the last session, it talked about cursive writing, that it was just gibberish. One of the students talked about it, gibberish. And so it leads us to understand that in many communities, cursive writing is not being taught. And so one of the connections is allowing cursive writing to be taught even in Douglass School. Connection of place, that all of the students that would come on a tour would at least know how to write their name before leaving Douglass School, and remember that. Also looking at, Night at the Museum. We had an event where each classroom engaged a different figure from the national as well as the local history level in minority history. And so engaging those individuals, we had children as well as adults that learned something that they did not know. And so it was just, we were just excited about that opportunity to just constantly tell that story. Also hosting in partnership with IUK and even Ivy Tech scholarship events. How do we allow ourselves, our local community college has a Doing the Dream scholarship. And so how do we connect and allowing the opportunity of giving scholarships and learning about scholarships? Also, how do we allow ourselves even in FAFSA help? In Indiana, we have some opportunities that minority students are not aware of. And so how do we allow ourselves that if counselors did not share, how do we allow ourselves to still get that into the hands of our community? Also, library reading clubs, allowing ourselves to engage and partnering with the library to have our kids engaged in reading, constant reading. One of the things, even with the oratorical and dramatic reading contest, it connects with the national Black history theme. And so allowing ourselves to always change and to think about different books each year and building upon that. Also, the library recently had a genealogy event, and so helping our community understand their family history. Where did they come from? There's much more work to be done in the cemeteries. Being able to recognize that we have two cemeteries, the Rush and the Bassett settlement cemeteries that just need our attention, and also there are many stories that are there. Allowing ourselves to connect also with alum. There are many who attended the schools that have not connected. And so allowing ourselves to be a place of connecting those students and to allow them to tell their stories. It's Sarah and Amy have been engaged in oral history project. And we have just heard so many stories, and it's just even when we're meeting, we have alum on our committee who even share stories or share reflections or have connected with other individuals. And so even through these reunions, it provides opportunity that individuals can come together on the grounds of that school and be able to share about the impact that the school has made. One of the significant impacts that I constantly am just at all that I just had an alum, as a matter of fact, on this week to come and to share some valuable resources about the school and talking about the importance of that school as a place of racial reconciliation. That was the first place that they ever engaged with someone of a different race, and being able to just share with me the stories that sometimes they have walked in the grocery store and someone says, you look so familiar. And they'll say, are you such and such? Well, that was my maiden name. And just standing there crying, sharing that if I knew then what I know now, it was just something that was a place that we came together. We weren't thinking about race, but that school brought us together. And so allowing those stories to be told. And then also engaging in fundraising. It takes money to make it happen. We're having a jazz brunch. Everything that we do, we try to build upon education and that it was a school. And so allowing the community to move forward. One of our struggles constantly is, and I'm sure as we continue to move forward, it takes another tragedy or another pandemic in order to get the community to come back and to recognize that this work still needs to be done. It's like, after there's the news has projected something, we'll talk about it. And then it gets silent again. And, we even notice that even in our fundraising, it's this, constant that you have to lift up the fact that this is needed. As a part of George Floyd and the pandemic, it calls the community to have to talk about this and to look at this. But we recognize the fact that we're blessed with grants that have come in to support this effort. If there's no struggle, there's no progress. And it has been a hard journey. It's been a long journey. There's much work that has been done. We're excited about the opportunities that are ahead. I'm excited about the relationships that we've built. Sarah and Amy are only two from the IU Kokomo and the library. They have been great partners. The Historical Society. There are so many partners in it. It takes all of us to work together. And so we are excited about being able to preserve this school and also to be able to continue this story and to be able to share this for generations to come. And again, a big part of it has been to make sure it's an intergenerational experience. Okay. So question.
Good afternoon. I am a little late coming in because I was attending another. I called my daughter and just as I called her. Excuse me, pick me up at preschool. Excuse me, I've been waiting for that for 15 minutes, but to let her know to pick me up. But so accept my apology because my phone ringing. But I was actually born here. I was born in James City County a few years ago. Went to Brooklyn High School, and I heard you say reaching out. Reaching out is of utmost importance, especially here. There are so many older people, and I know because I've traveled around. I'm a musician, I'm a gospel musician, gospel singer, and I haven't been born in this community. When I say community, this community, I don't mean just Williamsburg, James City County, but York County, Gloucester, Charles City, Henrico, all of the entire area. When you reach out, if you're reaching out to bring people in, to get them involved, it would surely be wonderful to have a means of getting that done. We're willing to help, okay? I'm not just running my mouth. We are willing to help reach out to the different community, to the different churches just in this geographic area. There's so many Black churches that would be, and the people there are older. They have information, they have knowledge of even where they live and beyond, like Charles City and different places. So if you give us a tool that we can work to help you, we are willing to do that. And I know I'm speaking for the masses because I hear many people speak about what's going on here in Williamsburg. Many of them think it's just what's happening at my church, which is First Baptist. But it's not just what's happening at First Baptist and the archaeological dig and the Brace School. It's a lot more. And I'm happy that you gave me this opportunity to say this, because when you say reach out means not just reach out to a surface, but reach out to the entire area. And I'm willing to help in any way I can. And that's why I would raise my hand so that you would know that there are people in this community, not just Mildred Walker. I was born here, yes. And I walked the streets of Brooklyn Heights, got to Brooklyn Heights when I was 12 years old. And so I know the area very, very well. And we are willing to help get the word out. We're willing to help reach out, because just a few little people in one geographic area is not reaching out to the people. Thank you for letting me say that.
Yeah, that is key. One of the things that even as we think about the work that we're doing in Kokomo, Indiana, is the importance of how do we allow this also to be a model for other communities? How do we allow other communities to develop alum relationships? And so I think that is very key because it's not the only segregated school, but there are many segregated schools in communities. And I think that it's just important to be able to form those relationships. Churches, of course, naturally, there is a connection because many schools were founded with churches, and so it's just important to make those connections. And we've been grateful that being able to engage with churches and then also the various other community organizations have been helpful. So
one last statement, many years ago, churches would communicate with each other. Today, it's seemingly that they are expecting to only use the mediums of Facebook, emails, and there are many older people that don't have access to that medium or to that process of hearing. We did flyers. We sent flyers to the many different churches. And if the older people couldn't read them, like my grandmother could not read, but I was there. And I also would give it to the members of my church. At that time, I was a member of St. John Baptist Church on Forge Road in Toano. So, but they're now using social media, and social media is not working with older white or Black people.
Right.
So we need to get away. We need to rethink this.
Yeah.
And get a means of communicating with people so that you have more people involved and more people trying to help you accomplish what you're trying to accomplish.
definitely.
And we
Does that make
definitely
sense?
do a lot of that, yeah. So we have informational cards that people can fill out at individual churches. There's more than one church represented at
I
the,
can't hear you well.
there's more than one church represented at the Douglass School meetings, and it's through the churches that we use other kinds of media. So a person can fill out an information card. They can get a phone call, right? There's other ways that we supply them with information, and there really is a great network of alums. And so that's kind of neat, but we don't even stop with, we love Kokomo to be the center of it, but we also, so for example, a trip is being planned to Lyles Station, which was a small community in southern Indiana founded by former slaves. And so just looking at what have other communities done? How did they maintain those connections? That's really what we're trying to make sure that we're being as thorough with that history as we can be.
All I'm saying is that the social media that we're now using, Facebook, email, they are not really working that well. I'm not going to say they're not working at all, but they're not working that well to reach the masses of people out there.
Definitely.
Black or white, they're not, it's not working because they don't know, many people just don't know how to use email, Facebook, or any of that. And if you have flyers, make flyers, colorful flyers. I mean, they could read that. And I'm not trying to tell you guys how to run your operation. I'm only telling you the truth of what's happening. The key word to me today was, young man said, reaching out. You can't reach out with the media. You can't reach out by sending an email or any of those media. You can't do it, especially and expect people to respond. Many of them can't see or don't know how to use email and so all the social medias like Facebook. They don't know how to do that. And it's not their fault. These are new, these are brand new things that are coming. And many people just don't know how to use them. And I'm not preaching, I'm just sharing. And I also made my statement that I'm willing to help. I'm willing to even get you the names of the pastors. We have an operation or an organization called Tri-County Pastors. You may have heard of that. That's all the Black churches. They are members of the Tri-County Pastors. And they would be more than willing to help in any way as well.
Yeah. Thank you for that. That would be very helpful for this community to be able to work on. Like I shared earlier, we're in Kokomo, Indiana, and so we've got a whole different network in Indiana that we're engaged with as well. There was a hand up over here.
I
Thank
was
you.
just gonna say, I thoroughly enjoyed this presentation. And the question I was gonna ask is that, and you may have mentioned already, and I do apologize if I missed it, but what tools have you all utilized to reach out to the alumni of the school, the Douglass School? Because I'm quite sure, in that area, but like the percentage of people that have moved away and live in other places and other communities.
Yeah, and it sounded like those old Brett commercials where it was like, we knew a few alums. And then we started asking people for contacts. And so in Kokomo is only about 50,000 people, right? And so, but it was basically like, and they told two friends and they told two friends. And so, the word got through. So like, oh, I call him, the oldest alum lives in Florida right now. Well, I gave him a call and, he says if he's up to it, he might try to come to one of the alumni events. So you'll get that. Or, hey, did you try to contact, what was her name, right? And you'll get that at the meeting, right? And it was like, oh, you remember, she was the one, they just lived, and so it's literally like that, where they'll recall some names, they write down the names, and then most often somebody knows a few other people. And so we have a network that's kind of like, there are some who prefer the phone calls, and there are others who are willing to use email or Facebook. And so you just we try to figure out what is their preferred communication method and then get people in the loop. And then I think the big, the alumni events and things like the jazz brunch, those take place once a year. And so you have enough time to plan the event and to get the word out.
Yeah, and I would hope that, and thinking that in the near future, once things progress, you all with your fundraising and everything, possibly, are you looking to maybe have some scholarships for high school students from that school?
That is something that we are not trying to duplicate, and it's the Martin Luther King Memorial Commission has a scholarship. There's another, NAACP has a scholarship. There's the Indiana Black Expo who has a scholarship. Our goal is to support them in doing what they do well. And, the partnerships, having those partnerships and allowing that.
But that's where some of the mentorship works as well. So when we have events that relate to the FAFSA, how to fill out the financial aid forms, or, are you aware, like IU Kokomo has a minority student scholarship as well. And so just are you aware that that kind of resource is available? Why don't we talk to some mentors who actually, the guy that did the great artwork is a graduate of IU Kokomo. And so he's another kind of great community hub, and he'll just say, hey, you should apply for this, right? What's the worst that can happen? They may say no, but you might be the only one who applies. So, give it a try, and we're here to help you really make sure that you're turning in a great piece of, a great submission that gives you a good chance of getting that money.
Thank you very much.
Yeah, I want to add to one of the things that we've been able to do, and we're working hard at it now that churches have opened back up, is just stopping by churches and having signups, as persons are going into churches, being able to intentionally allow that to happen. Community events, Carver Community has an annual fundraising event, Carver Fest. So being at Carver Fest. We also have a community Juneteenth celebration. We have a community First Fridays event. So allowing ourselves to be there and to sign, individuals will start talking about, well, you know what? And they go through their cell phones or they go through their address book and they share information in those ways. And so being able to, in various places, find out who are the alum, who, are those individuals also who are interested in this school, because there are some individuals who've never attended the school, but they are connected with some of the resources and history of the school.
Well, that's one other thing that we do is periodically I'll ask Pastor Smith to come over to IU Kokomo, and we'll sit down and meet with the chancellor or the chief of staff and just say, can you give us 10 tickets to the basketball game, let's use this as a recruitment event, right? So, as many schools are encountering, there's been a real drop off in college enrollment. And, I keep telling the chancellor, like, there are so many communities that are untapped sources of potential, and we really should be inviting people to come and see what could they do at Kokomo. Yeah.
Have you all learned stuff about the curriculum at the school and any similarities and differences between the curriculum at Douglas compared to the curriculum at the white schools?
Yeah, so there were no significant differences in terms of the basics, reading and math and so on. There were differences with some of the teachers and the treatment of students. Now, uniformly, the memory of Douglas students at Douglas Elementary School was incredibly positive.
Oh, wow.
Except after 1954. And so out of the people I've interviewed, maybe 24, I think, and only one individual said, I had a really bad experience. Okay. And keep in mind, I mean, the range, like the oldest person is in his 80s, I think, and younger people, I think one of the younger ones remembered the 1968 riots. Okay. And it was that individual who said, that teacher told me I was never going to succeed if I went to high school or to college. Okay. And she just treated me like I was stupid. And she said, and she was white. She was one of the only white teachers I ever had. Okay. Yes. So that was one difference, is that individual teachers just were overtly racist. The second thing that is very different is, since Kokomo High School was integrated, there are different memories. And so one white alum and some of the Black alumni remembered that everybody always came in one door, one entrance to the high school. And some say, oh, that was just because we all lived in the same neighborhood and that was the closest door, right? But a few other people said, oh no, we were told that we had to use that door. Right. And then, there's other whites who say, nobody ever told people they had to do that. Right. So there's a little bit of the denial, but one white alum, Rita, remembered it otherwise. And so that's one where there's a lot of mixed recollection or commentary, but it's certainly an indication of Kokomo's rather complex racial history, that there are some who are somewhat hostile. Yeah.
I had two questions, but if we only have time for one of them, that's fine. First one is, we were very interested in the Night at the Museum program and how you recruited for that, and were like the classes, like some example topics, and were the classes did they have adults and students in there at the same time? And then the second question is about, there's all this lovely grass around the school, and so I was wondering, have you used that for like gardens or anything, like getting community members in the dirt, or maybe connecting to some like curriculum that was taught, just environmental history, I guess.
Yes. The night at the museum it was intergenerational. We had, there was, I remember, I think it was a 5 or 6 year old with a 70-year old grandmother. And it was just powerful seeing all of them listening and engaged, because again, these are individuals who volunteer, but they're just natural actors. And so they were engaging everyone. And I heard probably the children were excited, were engaged, they loved it, but the adults really, I mean, we had Rosa Parks. And there was just some things that were just lifted up about Rosa that were not known by the adults, and so it's just the importance of having our history shared. The other question dealing with the land, one of the aspects is community green space, allowing it, getting on your laptop, just being able to lay there, have a picnic, that sort of thing. The other aspect is being able to develop some sort of community garden. Embracing Hope of Howard County, which is the nonprofit that manages Douglas School, also has other green spaces that we're actually working on now to use it because the north end of that Carver community is considered a food desert. And so allowing ourselves to, maybe put up a greenhouse, being able to have sort of a farmer's fresh market, teaching our young people how do you use fresh products that you've grown and to make soap, to make, all the various elements of what you need in life and to be able to sell it. So developing this whole entrepreneurship aspect of what they can do.
And this is another going forward thing. So there's a new grant open that we've just contributed to, emphasizing community and college cooperation. And that could be a pretty sizable stack of money. But one of the things that we were suggesting is Kokomo, Kokomo is a center of active and applied education. And so, for example, the guy that teaches philosophy does a lot of stuff with inequity. And so he already has done a project on building community gardens. He's working this next spring on a project relating to providing blankets for people who need them, right? So that's another aspect of just identifying what we were talking about, like people in need, what do people need? I don't want to hand somebody a can of soup if they need a blanket, right? So being able to really rely upon the skills on a small college campus is a great thing to do. And
I am like a developmental scientist, so I really appreciated all the programming efforts that were oriented around young people's needs and engaging them in this history. But I was wondering, when you all were doing like those community surveys and seeing what the purpose of the space could be, was there input from young people then? And then like, as you expand your efforts, like how do you plan on kind of keeping that intergenerational spirit where it's not just, like adults or older folks making decisions, but bringing young people like into that kind of organizational capacity as well?
yeah, and obviously you may have seen in the media pictures, the school is not habitable yet, but I think we're just getting HVAC in there right now. So we're getting closer. But yeah, there have been so there's somewhere through Carver where they're already aware of what younger people want. And there have been just sort of these broader questions, like, what do you really like incoming students to IU Kokomo? What's your biggest worry, right? Is sometimes we just ask a very open-ended question. What's your biggest worry about the next 5 years? And it's really interesting to see how people respond. So that does help to guide ideas. And again, I think that if the grant were successful, we already agreed that the first thing we would have to do is have a meeting of interested participants from IU Kokomo with community constituents. And we think it's going to evolve over time, right? And that's a really important thing, is that so many museums or community centers have a very set program. And we just think that needs change, right? And so, of course, if it's working, we can keep doing it. But if not, we have to be prepared to keep asking, those who are coming to the center should have that input.
Any other questions?
You all received any community resistance or pushback throughout your work?
There has been community pushback. One, related to the whole concept of, let's just think, not to be political, but let's just think about the period of 2019 to the present and the climate that existed. And so having that, there have even been some threatening Facebook posts and those kinds of things. So recognizing, again, Sarah mentioned that the Klan is still active, it's still present. So we've just forged on, and we're grateful for the support, especially of our governmental leaders and who are allowing themselves. And, I have to say, even IUK institutions such as IUK, our library, who led our first big survey opportunity, and then also Ivy Tech, and then even the Historical Society itself, the prominent, figure in preserving our county's history. So it's just allowed us to keep moving forward. I'm just grateful for that. But it is present. But again, it only reinforces why this needs to happen.
And I've had a couple people doing the oral histories that have said, I'm just against critical race theory. I don't want you to write it like that. And I'm like, well, I've never had a class in that, so that shouldn't be a problem. They'll be disappointed, but I know what they think their picture. Yeah,
I mean, one of the reasons why I ask is, as I said, I'm from Indiana and I remember going through the public school system and I felt like when I was going through the public school system, there just wasn't a lot of talk about race at all.
Mhm.
And I think that was in the aughts. And so it's not that long ago. Yeah.
but I mean, what I describe as the Hoosier Nice, right? Somebody will just, do that kind of lips pressed together thing, and you're like, they're really ticked off.
Yeah, that passive aggressive.
But they're not gonna say, right, but they're not gonna say anything. And so to me, I'm like, well, that means I get to do it the way I want to do it. I get to represent, what I think the people from the community are telling me. And if you don't like it, then don't read it, but that it doesn't make it a lie to say what has happened.
Well said.
Any other-
Sounds like y'all doing some great work.
Thank you.
We're excited. Thank you.
Yeah. You can tell I'm kind of no nonsense. So I'm like, to the chase, we gotta get this done.
Well,
If you would like to further engage with us, we've got a Facebook page as well as our website. You can connect with us. Also, we've got cards and we're just excited to be able to talk about this work.
Couple PowerPoints, if you just want to, I always think like some of the stuff I would never have thought of, and then we start talking and it's like, oh my gosh, they really do have some of those grit, right? So just getting the ideas or thinking about like what are things that you could do and how do you accomplish that is the hard one. How do you get the money to make some of those things happen? Thank you.
Thank you.
we can end up coming further, but thank you, everybody. Thank you.